Advertising has long been a mirror, not just of consumer desires, but of societal values, biases, and at times, its most messed up ideologies. The recent American Eagle campaign featuring Sydney Sweeney has ignited a debate. And while much of the discourse has focused on the racist undertones of the ad, I think this is something much worse. Rage bait. But before I tell you how, let's look at the ad and how it takes racist ideas from the past, why Sydney Sweeney would take on a campaign like this, and the corporate playbook that ensures our outrage only makes brands richer.
Down from parents to offspring, often determining traits like hair color, personality, and even eye color. My genes are blue.
Sydney Sweeney has great genes.
The ad presents Sweeney in a way that emphasizes her blonde hair and blue eyes, while positioning her as the perfect example of American beauty. And that framing carries some really dark historical baggage. The visual style looks similar to old ads and propaganda used to push harmful standards of beauty. And that happens in two ways. First, it reminds me of those over-sexualized Calvin Klein campaigns featuring a young Brooke Shields in the 1980s.
Finally, by natural selection, which filters out those genes better equipped than others to endure in the environment. This may result in the origin of an entirely new species, which brings us to Calvin's and the survival of the fittest.
Calvin Klein genes.
Those ads were heavily criticized for inappropriately sexualizing a minor, and rightly so. Shields was only 15 when she filmed the most controversial spots. The Sydney Sweeney campaign uses similar photography tricks like the close-ups and the suggestive styling, and the emphasis on sexuality as a selling point. And this is such a weird thing to do in this day and age, to use an ad with an exploitative legacy as a reference, especially in the age of Epstein. Even more disturbing is how the visual choices bring to mind the racist "love your race" advertisements used by neo-Yazis to promote their idea of a superior racial beauty standard. German Yazis also had campaigns that consistently featured blonde, blue-eyed models as the ideal of human beauty and genetic worth, with messaging that connected physical appearance to morality. The eugenics movement in America, which became popular in the 1900s, promoted the idea that certain physical, mental, and financial characteristics represented genetic superiority. This had real devastating consequences. This form of pseudoscience led to forced sterilizations of over 60,000 Americans, immigration restrictions that turned away refugees, and other horrific policies that treated human beings like animals. The Supreme Court case, Buck v. Bell, in 1927 allowed the state to sterilize individuals they labeled feeble-minded, with Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., who presided over the case, declaring that 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. The case targeted Carrie Buck, a woman from a poor background who was put in an institution and sterilized against her will. What's really crucial to understand is that Buck wasn't mentally disabled. She was targeted because she was assaulted, and that caused her to have a pregnancy. And then, on top of that, because she was poor and had a child out of wedlock, she presented the vision of what eugenics saw as the wrong kind of person to have a lineage, even though she was white. So, when American Eagle positioned Sydney Sweeney as the perfect example of American beauty, using visual language that echoes these campaigns, they're reinforcing ideas about who's ideal and what an American should look like. To understand why Sydney Sweeney would participate in such a campaign, we need to look at her background to understand her motivations better. Because her story is actually the perfect example of how the entertainment industry creates people willing to do anything for success. Sweeney didn't grow up wealthy. She was raised middle class, possibly lower, in Spokane, Washington, as well as Oregon and Idaho. And her family didn't just make sacrifices for a career, they destroyed themselves financially. Her parents went through a divorce and bankruptcy while funding her move to California to pursue acting. Imagine the pressure that puts on a teenager, knowing that your whole family, entire financial stability, and your parents' marriage are casualties of your Hollywood dreams. This financial strain and her outsider status among Hollywood's established elite fundamentally shaped how she approaches fame and fortune. At school, Sweeney was often the girl with the beat-up car while her classmates drove luxury vehicles, BMWs, Mercedes, cars that cost more than her family's annual income. She understood early that she was playing catch-up in a world where others had generational wealth, family connections in the industry, and the luxury of turning down opportunities that might hurt their image. This explains her willingness to take on numerous brand deals and her apparent comfort with controversy. She's operating from a survival mindset where any attention can be turned into money. Her well-documented lie about being a tour guide at Universal Hollywood reveals someone desperate enough to fit in and willing to stretch the truth to do so. She understands that in today's world, being talked about for any reason is more valuable than being ignored or forgotten. I predict she'll follow the path of influencers like Hailey Bieber, launching beauty, hair care, or if she's smart, a bra line within the next year. Mark my words, she's building an empire. And controversy is another tool in her arsenal. Another thing that I'm shocked that people are shocked by is her politics. Politically, Sweeney doesn't align with progressive values at all. She's an outright capitalist. She allegedly has Republican voter registration, but that comes as no surprise seeing that her family displays MAGA support as shown on her own social media. There was even a claim from a DJ who worked with her at an event that she had some undercover racist behavior. And not to mention her silence on the public endorsements from Trump's. She didn't immediately distance herself from them. We can also look at her high-profile appearance at Jeff Bezos' wedding during a time when billionaires face intense public scrutiny, and this signals something important. She's comfortable being seen as a part of the capitalist elite, rather than being the relatable girl next door her PR team often promotes. There's a bitter irony in Sydney Sweeney becoming the face of campaigns that echo eugenic beauty standards. And it shows how little most people understand about the actual history of the eugenics movement. While she fits the surface-level look, she represents exactly the type of person the historical eugenics movement would have targeted and eliminated. First, she's not naturally blonde. She dyes her hair to achieve the ideal look. But that's the least of it. Let's look at her surname, and being from Washington State suggests Irish ancestry. And eugenicists of the 1800s and 1900s considered Irish people racially inferior. Irish immigrants were shown in political cartoons as degenerates and described in scientific literature as a separate inferior race. They were considered genetically predisposed to alcoholism, violence, and mental problems, a belief that Irish people were biologically unfit for civilized society. Her family's background, bankruptcy, and divorce would have made them prime targets for eugenic policies. The movement didn't just focus on race, it targeted anyone deemed economically or socially unfit, including the poor, divorced families, and those struggling financially. Eugenicists believed that poverty was hereditary, and that financial struggle indicated genetic problems. So how do people like Sydney Sweeney escape this ideology? Well, there's two ways. One, by following the words of President Lyndon B. Johnson, who once said, "If you can convince the lowest white man that he's better than the best colored man, you won't have to pick his pockets. Hell, give him somebody to look down on, and he'll empty his pockets for you." So one, let them think they're better than other people. Let them think they're better than people of a different race. And if they aren't economically or socially better, just let them think that they have a seat at the table. And two, you have to play the game, the capitalist game. And yes, this is embarrassing and controversial, but it perfectly describes Sydney's transformation. Sydney's rise has helped her become this new form of aspirational whiteness for lower-class whites. It's the promise that if you perform the right kind of whiteness and play the game correctly, you too can transcend your class origins and become the idealized version of American success. And this whole kerfuffle that's happening is reinforcing it. The tricky thing about it is, even though she's been invited into these spaces, there's no guarantee that she'll always be here in the spotlight. The love and attention is very fickle, and she can be liked today and cool today, but gone tomorrow. And I think Sydney knows this, and she knows it more than most. She understands that it's about performing, and she'll do that no matter the cost. If we want to get to the nitty-gritty of what the real issue is with this ad campaign, it's not that it's hypersexual, and it's not that it has racist undertones. I know people won't want to hear that, but that's really the least of our worries, honestly. What we should worry about is that corporations are deliberately manipulating public outrage for profit, and we keep falling for it every single time. American Eagle, like most major brands, operates with complete cynicism about social and political issues. They don't care about your values. They don't care about anything but your engagement metrics. So let's break down how this manipulation works.
The life of a model is simplistic, really.
Corporations hire a team of market researchers, data scientists, and social media analysts, whose entire job it is to identify what will generate the most online discussion. Consider Target's announcement that they would no longer separate boys and girls' toys, I think in 2016. This was a very calculated move on Target's part, with the market research that they had showing that millennial and Gen Z parents were increasingly rejecting traditional gender roles for their children. But for conservative consumers, this felt like an attack. It seemed like the company was trying to influence their children's gender identity, and they found that deeply troubling. They calculated that the positive response from progressive consumers would outweigh the negative response from conservative ones, and that the free publicity from the controversy would be worth millions in advertising that they didn't have to pay for. That's what they were hoping for when they were rolling back DEI policies this year, but boy, did that backfire. The Sydney Sweeney ad controversy operates on the same principle, but from the opposite direction. Just as conservatives felt manipulated by Target's toy policies, progressives feel manipulated by American Eagle's campaign. Both represent corporate decisions designed to generate buzz and free advertising through controversy. The company wins either way. If you love the ad, you might buy their clothes to support them, and if you hate it, you're talking about American Eagle and driving traffic to their social media. I feel like this cycle of manufactured outrage has become the backbone of modern marketing. Companies no longer trying to appeal to everyone. They deliberately split audiences because division drives engagement and engagement drives sales. Remember when Bud Light partnered with Dylan Mulvaney? And because their data showed that Pride attendees drink their product. Well, Bud Light drinkers didn't because the backlash hit their stocks and they tanked. They quickly distanced themselves from Mulvaney and anything with Pride altogether, but honestly, the damage is kind of done. Similarly to when the Daily Stormer endorsed New Balance shoes, after Jim Davis, the owner of New Balance, donated, I think, $400K to Trump. The company's CEO at the time immediately clarified that they weren't Trump supporters and that they love everyone. Well, Jim Davis never made those public statements distancing himself from MAGA politics. Davis has been systematically trying to buy Boston politics, donating over $1 million to a PAC designed to attack Mayor Michelle Wu through negative advertising campaigns. He's funding money backing Robert Kraft's son, Josh Kraft, as his potential mayoral candidate. You know, totally above board and not a way to screw over Bostonians. The harsh reality is these corporations view all of us as dollar signs. They don't care about Republican family values or progressive social justice. They care about data points, quarterly earnings, and the shareholders. American Eagle knew this ad would generate controversy and that the attention, both positive and negative, would be worth more than a forgettable campaign. We are being played, and the sooner we recognize that our outrage is being used against us, the better.